All right, and we're back. Episode 4. I'm Randall Ledet Jr.
I'm Hunter Ziesman.
And this is the new SEC podcast, baby. Let's go. Week 2, we're coming in hot off of a fresh week 1. The SEC went 13-3, and we have another great slate of games, starting off with Michigan versus Texas at noon. College Game Day is going to be there. Fox's Big Noon is going to be there. And then we got our first ever SEC game between South Carolina and Kentucky for this season, of course. I'm really excited to really see a game like that and see what those teams can do. Hunter, man, how you feeling for this week? And, how you feeling overall about some good old SEC football?
I'm feeling good, man. SEC football in week 1 was awesome. We got to see, Vanderbilt come out and pull up that big upset. We got to see Georgia do what Georgia does. And then this week, we're looking at another great slate. We're getting to see teams like Tennessee and Arkansas, who had, tune-up games against inferior opponents last week, getting to put it all on full display. So I'm excited to see what these teams can do. I'm excited as ever about, Texas and Michigan. That's a huge, huge game. So I'm excited to get into that one. But really, I'm just feeling good for football.
Yeah, feeling really good. And Texas has an opportunity to represent the SEC up in the big house. It's going to be super fun. And like you said, we got a great slate of games on Saturday. So for this episode, we're going to pick 6 games to preview across the SEC. We're still talking interconference or out of conference play. We got our first ever conference game for this week, for this season. And then we're going to go around the rest of the SEC and talk about some of the other games. Some teams are looking at tune-up games. Every team is trying to define who they are identity-wise. And so let's just get right into it, man. It's going to be a really fun one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's get right into it. And why wait? Why wait to talk about Texas and Michigan at the end? Let's talk about it right now. Everyone's eyes are going to be on it. It's the game everyone's looking forward to. And if this game was played last year, it might be looking different. This year, Texas looks really strong and Michigan maybe not so much. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking is that this is the new SEC podcast game of the week. Last week it was Texas A&M versus Notre Dame, and that definitely didn't disappoint. And for this game, Michigan fans can't help but look at the past. If I watched that when I watched that Fresno State game, I wasn't really too impressed necessarily from what I saw on the offensive side. But Michigan fans are probably still having that afterglow from a championship win, taking down an SEC team like Alabama and taking down Michael Penix. But for Texas, the story has to be a 52-0 win over Colorado State and what you saw on the offensive side. Quinn Ewers has continued to ascend at higher heights each year. And so he didn't really disappoint in week 1 with going for 260 yards, 20 for 27 and 3 touchdowns. The receiving corps was able to get a fair share of the rock dished around between Isaiah Bond getting a touchdown, transfer, and, star player at Texas, Matthew Golden, getting 2 touchdowns and showing what he can do in front of the country with this now, new national audience. And then on the running game, they were missing players, like CJ Baxter, but 2 of the running backs combined for over 100 yards, and Jarrett Gibson and Jaden Blue. And so there's a lot to be positive on from the offensive side. Hunter, when you think about Texas, what are some things that are important that you think are going to resonate for this game?
Yeah, I think Texas, you mentioned it, a lot of weapons, a lot of different people to go to. And this Michigan defense is stout. It's solid. Their question mark is on offense. But what Texas is going to be able to do, they're hoping is to pick apart this defense using the variety of weapons that they had. They would love to have CJ Baxter. They would love to have Christian Clark, but they're making do with what they have. We saw them get everyone involved against Colorado State last week. Michigan, the big question mark going into this game wasn't the defense. It was the offense. Who do we put at quarterback? Davis Warren gets that start. And between him and Donovan Edwards, there were some struggles last week against Fresno State. Davis Warren, 11 for 15 for 118. Donovan Edwards couldn't get it done. Khalil Mullins had to step in and kind of pick up that pace from the backfield. Michigan is probably going to look to slow the game down a little bit. Texas is going to look to pick the game speed up. I don't know if Michigan's strong defense is going to be able to slow down the Texas offense enough to keep the offense back off the field.
Absolutely. And, in Michigan's credit, this offense in Texas is probably the most explosive offense they've seen since last year with Washington, Alabama, and Ohio State. And of course, we saw what they were able to do against all those opponents. But I think last year, Michigan had more balance on the offensive side, just going off of game 1. There was a struggle to kind of score on Fresno State. I think they only had about 10 points going into the second half. And Texas, looking at how they did last year and looking how they did week 1, this is such an explosive offense, but you can't ignore the defense, right? Last game, they were able to force 2 turnovers, big interceptions from, Jahdae Barron on the Texas side. And also they were only allowed 11 first downs. And you talked about it with Donovan Edwards. He was such a big player last year alongside Blake Corum at running back, and now he's the main guy. Obviously, Mullings was able to step in and kind of carry that load, but they need a big game from him. 27 yards is not going to get it done like he did last week when it comes to setting the pace. And when you think about Sharon Moore football, first-year head coach at Michigan, maybe hopefully we don't see any waterworks here. If they do end up pulling it out, I don't know if I want to see him cry again. But first-year head coach, his brand is pound the rock. You saw it last year when they played Penn State, ran the ball 40 times to win, and control the time of possession, right? But if you're going to have running performances like we saw last week, they're not going to have that opportunity because they're going to need to put the ball in the air more early and often if Texas is getting off to a fast start. And so that's kind of what I expect in this game, just going off of the last week. Texas is coming in big here. The spread's 7.5. And so it'll be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. And not Texas A&M. We'll talk about them another time. Texas, their offense was firing. Michigan does have some pieces to slow that down. I mean, they have Mason Graham, they have Will Johnson, two of the best players in the country on the defensive side of the ball. Kenneth Grant also getting in there to add some extra pressure. Will Quinn Ewers be able to step up in the face of that pressure and deliver? Again, Will Johnson can only cover one guy. They lost Keon Saab to Alabama. We saw what a guy like that can do. So trying to replace that production on the defensive side of the ball is going to be tough. If they can slow down Quinn Ewers, we'll see. We'll see where it can go. Vegas is expecting a low-scoring game. I'm expecting a low-scoring game. I think it'll take a little while for Texas to find their footing against this defense. But 7.5-point favorites, I think they get it done by a little bit more than that. I got Texas by 13. I think maybe 30 to 17.
So it's a wide margin. This is the first time they've played since 2005. If you remember the Rose Bowl with Vince Young, one of the most eclectic quarterbacks to ever grace the field in college football. They edged it out 38-37. Different scenario, obviously a bowl game, but we can't underestimate, and I don't think people are, but you can't underestimate the power of playing in the big house. I mean, Drake says, right, like big as the what? Like this is a massive venue. I think it holds about 107,000 people, and I think it's like 107,001. They have like one extra seat. It's gonna be electric going into a road environment. We'll definitely have these players fired up. I'm sure Michigan's gonna have a ton of pageantry and different, just things going on in between plays just to get the fans up and ready. I still have Texas winning here. I don't have them winning by 13 per se, but I do have them taking this game 31-21. I expect to see more from Davis Warren, and I think they'll also get their other quarterback involved since he's more mobile and can kind of maybe help spur that offense in a Denard Robinson type way for the Michigan listeners that may catch this preview.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that game. It's going to be a big one. It's going to kind of paint the picture for where these teams go when it looks at the college football playoff landscape. Both of these teams are hoping to make it, and the expectation there from both of them is that they make it. So what happens here will show the committee later in the season who has that stronger out of conference, who has that out of conference win.
I love when we have an opportunity to talk about real out of conference games and not hypotheticals. And so this is one of those that provides that. We have another game that's going on around the same time. It features Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. Ollie Gordon at running back for Arkansas, or Ollie Gordon at running back for Oklahoma State, and then new quarterback Taylon Green for Arkansas, who gave fans a lot to be excited about for the season. A lot to look at and to dig in there. So, Hunter, man, you've been looking at Arkansas, you've been looking at Oklahoma State. Like, what you thinking?
You look at Oklahoma State, the first guy I think of right now is Ollie Gordon. Like, you can't ignore it. The guy is on fire. Last season, over 1,600 yards carrying the ball, over 6 yards per carry. Last week, 3 touchdowns, only 3.9 yards per carry. And people are posting online like, did they slow him down a little bit? And that's all you can really hope to do with a guy like that is slow him down. Arkansas has the front, the guys up front on defense to do it. But you just hope to bottle him up. I think that Ollie Gordon is explosive, and the whole game plan for the Arkansas defense is going to be trying to figure out how to stop that guy running downfield.
Yeah, and I think what pairs well for Arkansas and what we talked about in the preview is that the defense is probably the least of their worries. It was more so what we're going to see on the offensive side. And we saw a very explosive performance with them with 70 points. Again, it was against Arkansas Pine Bluff, call it a tune-up game. But when you get a new transfer quarterback from a group of 5 team to the Power 4 level and you see, 4 or 5 touchdown performance, you should be excited. But defensively, the assignment has to be stopping Ollie Gordon. And last week, Travis Williams led defense, the defensive coordinator over at Arkansas, only gave up about 130 yards for the whole game. And Arkansas Pine Bluff was only able to convert on 1 first down out of 10, or 1 third down out of 10. So those stats, if they can be translated to Oklahoma State, obviously much more, much better team, right? You got Alan Bowman, 7th year quarterback. I mean, this man's probably taking his PhD classes at this point, but if they can stop him, and as the doctor, Alan Bowman himself, and slow down Ollie Gordon to where he's not averaging 6 yards a carry, maybe averaging 4. You get them in third down situations there, within 3 to 4 for third down. It's a completely different game. And so we'll see. Couple facts about the game. This is the first Power 4 matchup for both teams, like in terms of their schedule this season. Arkansas's last Big 12 win came in 2022 against Kansas in the Liberty Bowl with a 53-3 OT stunner. They've had a couple other Big 12 wins, technically, if you count BYU and Cincinnati back in their independent and AAC days. But always fun to watch these Southwestern Conference-esque matchups for our older listeners and tuned in college football listeners.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. And I don't want to only, harp on Ollie Gordon, and Mike Gundy didn't either. He was already, in a press conference after the game. He's like giving praise to Taylor Green and DeQuindon Jackson, was like, when you have guys like that back there, you have to have a guy on them. You have to have a guy for them. So I'm expecting to see some spy defense from Oklahoma State, because they're going to try to contain Taylor Green to force him to pass out of the pocket. Last week, he was missing his number 1 receiver. This week, questionable. But we saw that he was still able to move the ball to the other receivers there. Isaac Tesla being one, and Tyrone Bolden, Broden, see his name right. But he was able to move the ball out of the pocket. So hopefully, we'll see Taylor Green be adaptable to whatever the Oklahoma State defense throws at him. I like the Arkansas team. I really do. But, we're looking at Oklahoma State as 7.5-point favorites.
Yeah, I mean, Vegas gets it right. Vegas gets it wrong, right? I'm not saying anything prolific there, but the 7.5-point favorites, I think, goes off of what we saw from this OK State team last year. They were able to pull off a 24-point win against San Diego State or South Dakota State. And that's a 2-time champion FCS team, right? Probably lost a good amount of players in the portal that made the jump to the FBS level. And they still are able to hang in these type of games with teams like Oklahoma State, who have 20 additional scholarships in them to offer to players. But bringing it back to Arkansas, this is the SEC. Taylor Green, if you watch the highlights, they scored 10 touchdowns. He looked like a combination of Cam Newton and Johnny Manziel out there, the way he was cutting between defenders and having big runs. And it gave you something exciting to look at. I'm a believer. I like looking at how that game went down. They do have to go to Boone Pickens Stadium, so that probably plays a role in the 7.5-point spread for Oklahoma State. Playing road games in college can change the lines tremendously, even for 2 evenly matched or 2 mismatched teams. So I'm rolling with the SEC. Woo pig suey. We're going Arkansas 28-21.
All right. I would love to see it. I think we're going to see a shootout. Which team can score the most points? Give me Oklahoma State 38-27. I'm just looking for a good game, honestly, and looking for some showing from the SEC here.
Definitely. So I'm looking for the win. You're looking for a good game. I'm just kidding with you, but it should be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm happy for any good football. I mean, looking ahead, good football. We love to see the SEC play out of conference games, but where it really matters and where the SEC championship starts getting, the ratings start, figuring out where teams are going to land, it's going to be SEC versus SEC ball. Week 2 now, we have our first inter-SEC game. We got South Carolina and Kentucky. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good one. And, prior to this season, that was a SEC East matchup. But as we know now, there are no more divisions. So we were talking about this before we went live here and before we recorded. It's really fun to see some of the traditional SEC rivalry games still happening, with the 16-team conference. The schedules kind of shuffle. There's like one locked rivalry that's kept, and then the rest is just kind of a shuffle every 4 years. So South Carolina, Kentucky gives us our first SEC on SEC game. These two teams are pretty evenly matched in their last 4 matchups. They've split the series with South Carolina winning the last 2. We're kind of used to some NFL talent at the quarterback position, with Kentucky having Will Levis in the past, and then with South Carolina having Spencer Rattler over the past 2 seasons. But this game, it features 2 new quarterbacks and really 2 new regimes that are starting when it comes to how those quarterbacks are going to run their offenses for these teams. So what were your thoughts when you looked at Lenore Sellers and Brock Vandagriff this past weekend?
I think both quarterbacks had their bright spots. I think that a lot of the fault when we're looking at Lenore Sellers from a stat sheet don't necessarily show what was happening there. We can talk about Brock Vandagriff first and what he was able to do with his explosive weapons, getting them involved in different ways. You talked about it in the last episode. Barry and Brown, they got him involved in, jet sweeps, different ways that Kentucky offense is being able to utilize the strengths of their receivers. I don't think that stops here. Lenore Sellers had a little bit of a harder time getting his guys involved. When you look at the two units on the field, the best unit for Kentucky is the D-line, and the worst unit for South Carolina is their O-line. So Lenore Sellers, he was facing that pressure, 4 sacks from Old Dominion. If you're getting sacked 4 times from Old Dominion, I don't want to see what that number is going to be against Kentucky if you put up the same performance as an O-line.
Yeah, and in addition to the 4 sacks, one of my concerns with Lenore Sellers is just the amount they're asking of him, like, so early, right? He had 22 rushing attempts. Obviously a lot of intentional intended runs, run pass option. And so, 22 carries on the ground and you're throwing the ball 20, 25 times, you're taking a bunch of hits against an Old Dominion defense that is it is not as good as Kentucky's. Could pose some potential issues, but it's the first game of the season, and so, like we said last episode, you got the win. If you're South Carolina, I think you rinse and repeat, and you rinse that off, and you focus on the next game, which is going to be Kentucky. The defense played well last game. They forced two fumbles in the red zone, so plays like that are going to be crucial for them to put the offense in a position to score, which is what we saw last week against Old Dominion. When you look at Kentucky, I think it's Delanie Walker at defensive tackle is a preseason All-American, All-SEC type guy. He's going to play a key role, and Kentucky was able to add some culture guys. Dime Subo Karnbavi from Georgia is a 2-time champion, played a key role. Ultimately making some huge stops for them. And then you also look at Dane Key. When you watch the film, I was super hot on Barry and Brown. He had 2 touchdowns. He got involved in the run game. Jamori Macklin got a touchdown, so Jeremy Macklin's cousin. But Dane Key, he seems like to be their glue guy. If you need just a firm possession catch or a big play, he's the guy for it. And so I expect them to continue to spread it out across those 3 receivers. Brock, he only completed 12 passes, but he got 3 touchdowns. The 1 interception he had was a tip pass. So he impressed, and he showed that he has some wheels as well. He's not just a pure pocket passer, and I think he has something to prove this year. And there's no shade to Georgia, but it's a competitive conference, and I think he wants to show that he can hang at any program and that he's a capable starting SEC quarterback no matter what resources are around him. And so I got Kentucky taking this one. I think it's going to be 31-14. I think that defense is just too strong for South Carolina. I don't think that South Carolina forces the turnovers like they did last week. And I think, once Kentucky gets up on a good lead, they can just kind of wind the clock down at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Brock Vandagriff, something to prove. He's got his original team next week. He's playing against Georgia. So this gives us some time to figure out the SEC play, get some film, some things that he can maybe tweak for that next week's game. But I think Kentucky, like you said, comes out here swinging. It's going to be a bit of a slower start, in my opinion, but the line moved from 9 to 10 in favor of Kentucky. So people's money's on Kentucky. Mine will be too. I think Kentucky wins 24-14. It's going to be more of a defensive matchup. I think Kentucky's playmaking core there from the receivers get some things done.
Yeah, definitely. And it should be a really fun one. I mean, Kentucky, they're all around really good. And these are the type of games in the past they have traditionally won. The last 2 years they haven't, but typically these are the games they usually win. And so hopefully they're not looking too far ahead to Georgia the following week. But this one should be a really fun one. It's going to be 3:30 Eastern, primetime, middle of the day on ABC. So ESPN is definitely taking advantage of that SEC contract and broadcasting these games across all their platforms.
That's right. No, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see it. Another game I'm excited to see is anytime we get a rematch of a past season. We love home and homes and getting a chance to see if players return, they get an opportunity to play a team that maybe they lost to last year. And Cal is going to be coming to Auburn this year to try to avenge the 14-10 loss that they had last year. This Auburn team looks a little bit stronger this year, and the Cal team looks a little bit worse. So we'll see if it's as tight of a game as it was last year.
Yeah, we'll definitely see, right? And going to Cal Berkeley, think 3 hour time difference coming from the central time zone with not Birmingham, where Auburn is to Berkeley. Things are different when you're playing in your home stadium. Jordan O'Hare has a tremendously different atmosphere than the stadium that Cal plays at. And Cal's performance last week doesn't really lead to some feelings of optimism fully, right? Again, positively, you won the game, but you play UC Davis, which is your, same school family rival, if you will, right? UC Berkeley, UC Davis, all the UCs, but that's a team that, trotted out a quarterback that really wasn't that good. But you should be feeling good if you're Cal with Jay Knott. Last year he had over 1,300 yards and I think about 15 touchdowns. And so he started the season off with 2 touchdowns last game. Only on 14 carries. And so I think he had to go out early, just kind of feeling off a little bit. But on the Auburn side, my thoughts for people that listened around the team was that they were just returning a lot of youth that we haven't seen play. So there is this thing in college football where people get better, right? They're training in the off season, they're running routes, they're getting with the quarterback, they're practicing, they're doing 7-on-7. And so you saw that in that game where all of that effort paid off. And we saw a jump in these players' skills that we haven't seen because they were just young. And Peyton Thorne impressed, 5 touchdowns, tying his career high from last year when they beat Arkansas 48-10. They took care of business on the defensive side. They only gave up 3 points. They were the only team to score 73 points, so the most points scored in the SEC last week. And the opponent was Alabama A&M, but they took care of business. They didn't look sloppy. You saw a good performance by Cam Coleman, freshman phenom, 5-star, was able to find the end zone and got 62 yards. And you're also able to see, senior Keandre Lambert get 2 touchdowns, 80 yards. So you want to see your guys in the skill positions show out. And there's a guy I think you're really hot on at running back for Auburn that I'm sure you're expecting a lot to see as well.
I am, yeah. I mean, Jarquez Hunter is that seniority. You mentioned the youth that's returning. Jarquez Hunter is that seniority that they're going to rally behind. I'm excited to see what he can do. If you're Cal and you gave up over 300 yards to UC Davis last week, and you have to go into Jordan Hare under the night lights and see Jarquez Hunter running downhill at you, you're starting to shake a little bit. Nothing against the Cal offense. They were able to turn it on late in the game, scoring 24 unanswered. So after they got over that hump, a lot of teams had it, that early season beginner, shake off the rust from the off season. They were able to turn it on a little bit, but the defense didn't look very good. You can't be giving up long drives to UC Davis and expect to shut down the explosiveness of Auburn. Now we didn't see last week. We didn't see Auburn really run the ball too much. They didn't have to. They took what they were given from that RPO that Peyton Thorne ran so often, 60% of their plays in the air. So I'm excited to see where that run comes out this week, and I hope to see Jarquez Hunter have a big game.
Yeah, and a lot of people were calling out Hugh Freeze for not going after a quarterback in the portal, but again, I think you focus on development and develop the guys you have in house, and when you show that you believe in the guys you have, it makes it easier for you to get recruits that can look and say, okay, this guy is going to give me a year or 2 or 3 years to develop, right? He's not just going to give me a season and go in the portal and try to find a seasoned veteran, right? The Lincoln Riley approach or the Miami approach, if you will, just pay and buy who's the best. And that's not to say that Auburn doesn't have the funds, because I'm sure they do, and I know they do. We're seeing that in the 2025 recruiting, but bringing it back, these 2 teams last year, Cal finished 6-7, Auburn finished 6-7. Both teams are kind of projected to finish, in the 3rd tier of their conferences, but like with a lot of upside. Like it's not a negative side. They're probably expected to make a bowl game once again. On the Cal side, I just did a little bit of research. They showed some really positive signs offensively last year. Putting up 32 points and 40 points in losses to Washington and Oregon State. But then other games, they only put up 7 to 14 points against tougher defenses like Utah and UCLA. So with Auburn's defense being top 50 last year in yards allowed, I really see Auburn really hammering this game from a defensive perspective. I think the offense continues to show out, and I know they have better athletes on the Auburn side. So I'm taking Auburn here 24-10. What's your prediction?
I think I'm pretty close to you. I'm going to go 34-13 Auburn. I think we're going to see Cal have a hard time get started on offense like we saw last week. We're going to see a couple, garbage time touchdown, a couple of field goals from Cal late in the game. But Auburn is going to bring out that flashy RPO offense, too many weapons, some fast guys out there. 34-13 in a good game there at Jordan Hare.
I like it. We got a lot of high scoring games here in the SEC. The SEC at one point was known as a defensive conference, and so I think those tides have turned significantly. And hey, the War Eagle fans, they want to see it. They're still having PTSD from the Brian Harsin era, and they're not expecting a team with this amount of resources to beat teams like Cal 14-10. Like, they need to come out here and show something and get the fans excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to talk about guys that can score, right? You want to talk about some guys that can score. Let's talk about Nico Iamaleava. And before we crown him the Heisman because of what he can do against Chattanooga at Neyland, let's make him go to a neutral site game and play against NC State. This is one that I'm going to be personally super glued to. I'm excited to see what Tennessee can do. Being from North Carolina, I want to see NC State come out and put on a good performance, but really I want to see what Nico does against a big time team.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm not always the biggest fan of neutral site games. This one I love, right? Knoxville is less than 3 hours away from Charlotte. Raleigh, where NC State plays, is less than 3 hours away from Charlotte. And this is going to be a fun one. Everybody is on the Nico Iamaleava. I'm going to get his name right at some point. Hype train. And so, and rightfully so, right? Last week he started off 19 for 21 with 2 touchdowns, one touchdown on the ground, and they just continued to pound it on UT Chattanooga, their in-state family school affiliate. 45-0 at half, and so they have a lot to look positively. I think NC State probably had a pretty rough week of practice this week, and I know that they're getting ready for this game. Maybe they were overlooking Western Carolina. It's an FCS opponent, but you can't overlook these teams these days. And so I really like what Tennessee can do. Last year their defense was super stout, and so we'll see what Grayson McCall can do against his first SEC defense this year. Grayson being the starting quarterback for NC State and Coastal Carolina grad transfer as well. So I know it's local to you. Any other thoughts you have on the game?
Man, NC State last week, you mentioned rough week of practice, 38-21 against Western Carolina. You don't want to see that. A lot of NC State fans probably had this game circled as week 1. Last week probably one that you can, turn off late in the fourth, right? But it wasn't the case. Looking at NC State's defense, Dave Doran has put together a good defensive plan there. He typically runs like a nickel 3-3-5, which is a bend not break system where you're able to put some of your speedier guys on the field to keep plays in front of them. But if you on the flip side of that, you're only rushing 3 and having to bring your blitzes in other ways. If you don't get pressure on a guy like Nico, he's going to sit in that pocket and tear you apart. He has the arm strength. He has the precision. He has playmakers all around. So I'm expecting him to settle in, find the soft spots in that defensive scheme, hit some slants, put together long, 13, 14 play drives. And I'm expecting to see another big game from Dylan Sampson, maybe catching a few out of the backfield like he did last week.
Yeah, 3 touchdowns for Dylan Sampson, 124 yards on 12 carries. I don't know if NC State has an answer to stop that. If you're struggling to stop Western Carolina, this is an SEC offensive line. I know that Tennessee made some big pickups in the portal on the line from Oklahoma and other teams from Power 4 conferences. And Josh Heupel just has this team rolling, right? The hype train. This is a big one to set the tone for the season. Rocky Top Nation is definitely ready to see a W. And I'm rolling with Tennessee here. I think it'll be within 10 points, but I got Tennessee taking this one 28-17. So I think that's 11 points.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. It's going to come down to a couple playmakers, and we know the big playmakers. We know, Nico. We want to see Grayson McCall. The bright spot in the NC State team last week, Kevin Concepcion, putting up 3 touchdowns. That's huge from a receiver in a game where you're otherwise struggling. Tennessee's side, a playmaker that we want to see, James Pierce Jr. They didn't need him last week, 10 snaps only, but that guy is going to be a beast. He's going to get to Grayson McCall too often, too many times in the game. Grayson McCall is going to feel the pressure from this defense. They're going to struggle once they start seeing Tennessee, put up a lot of points. Give me Tennessee 31-14 at that neutral site game.
Okay, neutral site game. I won't be surprised if it's a lot of red, but the NC State fan base is very strong. I've been here in the Southeast for quite a while now, and I see the Wolfpack jerseys. I see the Wolfpack hoodies. I live in Atlanta, so even with Georgia Tech here, it's a lot of people I talk to. I'm friends with that are excited to go watch them play here in Atlanta. So that's a strong fan base. It's gonna be a fun one. Technically, Charlotte's ACC country, so that's where they have the ACC championship. So maybe they'll get some ACC magic, but I'm rolling with the SEC in this one.
All right, I am too. I'm looking forward to it. We have one last game that we want to talk about before we look at the remaining SEC slate, and this is a big game that we didn't really expect to be a big game. Two teams coming into this 4.5 point win totals projected for the season, but we have Mississippi State and Arizona State, and this is one that's flying under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and I think it's going to be the nightcap for the evening when it comes to the SEC. Pardoning any lightning delays or weather delays like we saw last week with Southern Mississippi and Kentucky. But this one's flying under the radar. I think Arizona State's coming in as like a 7.5 point favorite. I hope I don't buy too much into the propaganda. I was looking at Arizona State's Instagram, and they were showing they made a post, and it had like the crowd, and they used the stadium pulse meter from College Football 25. And I was like, it is a strong crowd, but it's Arizona State and it's Mississippi State. And Blake Shapen, transfer quarterback from Baylor, starting once again for Mississippi State, really showed out. He had 3 touchdowns. He led the team in rushing as well against Eastern Kentucky. And so looking to build off that performance for Mississippi State is something that they're expecting to see this game.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this team and this team playing. You mentioned Blake Shapen played a great game. They had a lot of good stats there on the sheet. Jeff Lebby in week 1, he came out and he wasn't thrilled, even though they got that big win. He was like, we on paper looked great, but a lot of this was explosive plays. We need to be a little bit more consistent and less streaky. I don't think there's anything wrong with chunk plays, but knowing that self-awareness and trying to bring a little bit more consistency to the game this week. And we saw 3 fumbles that Mississippi State put on the ground that they were at least able to recover. I think we'll see better weeks from rushing, or better performance from rushing with Johnny Daniels, Kayvon Lee this week. I'm looking forward to Mississippi State coming in here and giving it to them. They play fast football, 2.8 plays per minute. They're going to really overpower this Arizona State defense with how quickly they're going to be getting the ball out. And if they can get those chunk plays, that's pretty demoralizing to a defense.
Yeah, no, the chunk plays are important, and I understand where Jeff Lebby's coming from, right? Like once you get into conference play, those bigger plays are going to be hard to have set up, especially when you look at even if you just go off the recruiting profiles for some of the top higher SEC schools compared to Mississippi State. They're not getting the same players, the same caliber of players. They have a ton of talent, so you want to use these types of games to tease out what works in the offense. Establish the run game. They have the transfer running back, I believe, from Utah as their running back over there at Mississippi State. And they had a great performance from their top transfer receiver from UTEP. And so Jeff Lebby kind of comes from that Josh Heupel family of coaching. Josh Heupel, if people that followed UCF in the past, they saw to what Hunter's saying, that 2.8 seconds per play offense, which doesn't allow for teams on defense to get set up properly, get players in position, and really get rested, right? Those are the type of offenses that you see players on defense, have intentional cramps, or potentially there's an injury on the field where they're on the ground and then they somehow are walking up perfectly fine because the defense is not able to really get set up. Maybe this year with radios being installed in the helmets, you might not see that as much. Coaches don't have to make all the signals from their hands and have dummy signals. Now they can actually talk to the players for the first time in NCAA history at the FBS level. But technology aside, Mississippi State and Arizona State are both trying to establish who they are as programs. Both teams finished bottom in their conferences last year, respectively, for the Pac-12 and the SEC. And then, Arizona State's coming into this year in the Big 12. So brand new conference for them. This will be the second Big 12 on SEC game for the day when you include Arkansas versus Oklahoma State. And so going on the road, playing at 10:30 at night Eastern or 9:30 Central if you're in Mississippi, it's going to be more comfortable, of course, time zone wise for Arizona State. And the quarterback play last week was pretty good. I think Arizona State won 48-7. And so that's something that, this will be the first legitimate offense that Mississippi State faces. Obviously, you got to feel good about the defensive performance. But like you said, I don't want to say ball control, but controlling the possessions of the football is important. And so if they can, try not to put the ball on the ground as much, you can do that when you play for Eastern Kentucky, or you're playing against Eastern Kentucky, but you can't do that against Arizona State. This is a legitimate team, and we'll see.
Yeah, I expect both to really take their shots offensively. They're both, you mentioned, trying to find their identity. They're going to have a tough stretch ahead when it comes to their interconference play. So when they're looking at these out-of-conference games that everyone's scheduled this year, they're like, we need to pick up that one. We need to win that one. You want to win every game, but this one really probably means a lot to these teams because they're coming in, off of week one. They want to get a win here, set the tone for the season. I think they take the shots. We see one that goes down to the wire. I like the Bulldogs, 31-28.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, hey, I'm here for it. I'm taking the Bulldogs here as well. I think the spread's 58.5. So your point total gets pretty close to that. I'm going to say it's going to be 42-28 Bulldogs. Call me crazy, but I think the defense figures it out later in the game. And I think the offense just hits a rhythm and it's just, I'm trusting the offensive and defensive line from the SEC when it comes to Mississippi State. So I have the over here with my point total, but it'll be a fun one regardless. I'll definitely be tuning in at 10:30. Hopefully I can keep my eyes open, but definitely one. If I can't, I will be watching the highlights on YouTube the next day.
Yeah, that could be a Sunday morning pre-NFL warm-up game.
Yeah.
record it, DVR, whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's, there's 15 games this week. We covered 6 of them already. The other 9 games, a little bit less powerful opponent matchups, but we do have 9 other SEC games that are going to be happening throughout the day. Any of them in particular that catch your eye as one that you're going to be tuning into?
Yeah, I'm not ducking any smoke this time around. We got Houston versus Oklahoma. I'm a University of Houston alum, live in Atlanta, so love the South, love the Southeast. But for Oklahoma, given this is an SEC podcast, they had an amazing performance last week against Temple. I mean, I was in the gym watching the game, and I feel like every time I looked up at the screen in between sets, Temple was in the punt formation, right? That defense, I think they only gave up about 3 or 10 points. And that offense was really solid with Jackson Arnold. Deion Burks at receiver had 3 touchdowns, 2 of them early in the first half. And so the Jackson Arnold era started off to a super strong start. Yeah, you match that up with a pretty rough performance for Houston. They're entering a new era with Willie Fritz as their head coach. They're returning Donovan Smith as a senior quarterback, and a lot of their top players did transfer out with Sam Brown going to Miami, who had a touchdown last week, and Matthew Golden, that receiver, going to Texas, who had 2 touchdowns and was Houston's all Big 12 second team player. But it'll be interesting because this year it's on the SEC network. Last year this was a Big 12 game, so good colors. I'm really interested to see kind of what my alma mater does and where Willie takes this. They're not really projected super strongly, but if you look at Willie's history, 2-10 his first year at Tulane, 7-6 the second year at Tulane, and his third year, I think they go 13-1 or 13-2, win the Cotton Bowl, and they take down Caleb Williams, Heisman winner, the same year won the Heisman. So, but for Oklahoma, this is another big game that you can add to the win column potentially, put you at 2 wins. You're 4 games away from being bowl eligible, and then get you prepared for some of the bigger games coming up, like Tennessee in week 4 when they come to Oklahoma and to play.
Yeah, it'll be a good game. 29 points there. Houston could come in and make some things happen. I'm excited to still see this Oklahoma defense again if they can continue that pressure that they put on last week. Looking at the rest of the slate, there's 3 games that I'm excited for, and just they all have a common theme, and it's teams that lost last week. The 3 SEC teams that lost are going to come into this week and try to, based off of the film, try to figure out maybe where they can improve upon. 2 teams had an injury that they're going to look to use this week to test around. LSU, unfortunately, John Emery went down with another ACL tear in practice and is going to be out for the season. We hate to see that, be the end of his college career, but Josh Williams played okay last week for LSU, so they're going to try to probably get him involved more in the run game in this tune-up matchup against Nichols, and we'll see what they can do there. The other one is Florida. Graham Mertz out in concussion protocol. We saw DJ Lagway come into the game late last week and saw what he could do. I think that he might be maybe a better fit with this Florida team in the way that their offense is structured. It is Samford, but I think this is going to be a good opportunity for him to get comfortable with his receivers, get comfortable with his line, find his strides. So that way, when they do play Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and UCF in their next 3 games, if DJ Lagway has to play, he's not coming in cold off the bench. He has some game time experience as a starter.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think out of the 3 teams that have lost, I definitely am most interested in the Florida game. I think these games look like I'm not expecting people to be glued to their television. I would say they're more interesting than exciting, but it's the Florida Samford game is a game where I'm going to tune in. I'm going to be flipping around a couple channels, and if I see it's like 14-3 in the third quarter, you bet your ass I'm tuning back in and I'm seeing like, okay, well, what's going on here? Is Samford stopping them? Is Florida's offense just are they shooting themselves in the foot? And I think for DJ Lagway, I agree. Like, I never wish any injuries on quarterbacks, and it's unfortunate that Graham Mertz is out in the concussion protocol right now. But this is probably the most ideal game for him to start his college career when it comes to being a starter for the first time. Him and Eugene Wilson should ultimately be able to establish some good connections. Eugene last year was the leading receiver in terms of yards and touchdowns, over 600 yards and I think about 5 or 6 touchdowns. And, you hope to see more from the run game. You hope to see Florida kind of come out here and establish early on it's their game. Like, if I'm a Florida fan, I'm looking for them to be up at least 17 in the first half, right? If we go into halftime, it's 14-3, or if it's 17-7, I'm a little concerned.
Yeah.
You look at last week and just how the performance went. You got to show out. Billy's coming at people on these Florida Gator forums, and I understand the frustration, right? It's just like people are constantly coming at him. He lives in Gainesville, I'm sure, but you got to be able to back up that talk, especially against opponents like Samford before you play A&M and Mississippi State coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, we'll see what they can do. I think this will be a good one for Gator fans to be able to go back into the swamp, sit there, watch their team win, rebuild that momentum. Missouri is playing Buffalo this week. That's another one that's going to be interesting to see if Missouri can continue to do the things that we not were questioning that they could do. But we knew what they had in the receiving core, but we want to continue to see the advancements in the rush game. We want to continue to see what the defense can do. Buffalo scored 30 plus points last week against an inferior opponent, but I want to see Missouri continue up the defensive stops and limit their points, 10, 13 or less.
Yeah, and last week, they're playing Murray State, Kentucky FCS team, and I think if you look at Vanderbilt, similar colors, wrong team. If you look at Missouri's schedule, it's a little bit lighter. So games like Buffalo, we're not advocating to run up the score, but you want to see a significant separation of victory from a point margin perspective. And so Buffalo gives them a good opportunity to do that. The Buffalo coming out of the Mid-Atlantic Conference or the MAC Conference, good old MACtion, could put up a fight, but I ultimately expect that Missouri will take care of business. It'll be a pretty widespread margin. When I look at this slate, I tell you what, a game that I think is going to be a snoozer, and rightfully so. It's Georgia versus Tennessee Tech. I mean, if you could sim a week in college football 25 for your team, if you use Georgia as your team, this is the game I'm simming. You could play it on Heisman, and you're still probably winning by 45. And so obviously you hopefully you get the Trevor Etienne debut. Last week he was suspended due to a Dewey situation in Georgia fashion. But, moving on from the driving side of things, I think you want to see Carson Beck play well. You want to see Trevor Etienne play well. And hopefully you get an appearance from Jaden Rashada, their backup quarterback transferred coming in from Arizona State, and kind of see what he can do as someone that they're kind of building in the wings behind Carson Beck before he takes off to the NFL.
Yeah, in the same fashion as that game, I think Ole Miss is kind of right in the same line where you're just expecting them to come out and do what they did last week in the same way. Jackson Dart's probably only going to play the first half. We'll see him score about 5 or 6 touchdowns. I think they're going to keep the same momentum against Middle Tennessee. So, not too much to watch for there. 42 point favorites.
Yeah, there's another game that I was looking at this morning, actually. When they looked, ESPN put together their list of top 10 QBs for QBRs, and it was published by On3. And, our boy Jalen Milroe was first in the list. The list featured 4 SEC quarterbacks. Taylor Green was one of them, my guy. But, USF, University of South Florida, is playing Alabama at 7 p.m. on ESPN. USF coming from the American Athletic Conference, and then Alabama the second game in the Kalen DeBoer era. Should be an interesting one to kind of see what they can do on the offensive and defensive side.
Yeah, it's easy to be top in QBR when you only throw the ball 9 times. Well, he threw it 9 times really well, but they didn't have minimums there. I could tell when I saw that graphic as well and was keeping up with those stats. This is USF in the home and home. I was there at the game last year. That was a tough one to be at. It poured down rain. Alabama started a Notre Dame lacrosse player at quarterback. It was just it wasn't a game to be at. The final game I went to in the Nick Saban era, but we're gonna see Jalen Milroe be able to do what he does here in Bryant-Denny. I think we see him piece together a little bit more of the offense. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing is some extended drives as opposed to the huge chunk plays. USF isn't a bad team by any means. They're going to be able to force Alabama to make some of those third down conversions, picking up some additional pass yards through the 15, 16 yards like we talked about in the past episode. So I'm looking forward to that one. I'll be tuned in at 7 p.m. No doubt.
Yeah, and again, like it's on primetime ESPN, right? There's obviously ABC will have the NC State Tennessee game, and it's a ranked versus ranked matchup. But they put Bama on ESPN for a reason. There's obviously a couple other games going on. Missouri's playing at 7-2 against Buffalo. This is the American Athletic Conference is a good rep for being one of the top Group of 5 conferences. I think it's them and the AAC, and the Fun Belt or the Sun Belt is definitely kind of hawking on their tails here with some of the teams that they have there. But that should be a really fun one. Watching that game last year, I felt like I was in a twilight zone, just trying to figure out what. Like I can only imagine the thoughts that Nick Saban was having. Like either it was like, "I told you so," we should have played Jalen Milroe, or "You guys got to be kidding me." And one positive that did come from that game was people got to really see Jalen Milroe's character. High-fiving his teammate and high-fiving the quarterback that at the time took his job, right? Like really showing positivity and love. And that's, bias here, but that's one of the things people really like about Jalen is just like his character and whatnot. But when it comes to playing on the field, I expect Alabama to take care of business and ideally pretty big for their sake. Rounding out some of the other games in the SEC, I'm super hot on teams that are showing me something I didn't see last year. And so Vanderbilt's playing Alcorn State. The HBCU tour continues for the SEC teams. Alcorn State, of course, being an HBCU, playing in the MEAC. And, Vanderbilt is coming off of a really strong performance, taking down a top 4 ACC team, projected, not necessarily statistically with the 0-1 record for Virginia Tech. But we're really interested to see what Diego Pavia and that RPO offense can do. Do they add more flair to it? Where does Quincy Skinner get involved? And on the defensive side, like are they going to shut out Alcorn State? Like if we get a 40-point win, I get it's Vanderbilt, but that's the type of performances that we've been expecting to see from a team with the SEC on their chest and with the SEC resources.
Absolutely. And if you're in Nashville this weekend, tickets are as low as $2. So go watch some Vanderbilt football this weekend against Alcorn State. It's an exciting offense to watch. No, just joking here, but that is the whole slate. I mean, we've covered every game this week. We have 15 of them. That list will go down as the season goes on and we start more SEC play. But with Michigan and Texas and NC State and Tennessee, we're seeing some games that are really going to form the foundation of this season, and where the rankings will be later on we're going to see these games being looked back upon. So I was excited to talk about them.
Definitely. And I'm right there with you. Just being able to look at I'm going to look at this after this game and just kind of look at the breakdown from out of conference, like how they fare against the Big 12, how they fare against the ACC plus Notre Dame whenever they decide they want to be in the ACC, how they fared against the Big 10, whether it's USC or some of the other teams, and they'll get a strong Big 10 matchup this week with Michigan. But all these games are important. If the SEC can come out here 15-0, it puts a lot of teams at 2-0, puts some teams at 1-1, and puts teams closer to their goals of making the playoffs, maybe making a bowl game and, greener pastures when it comes to getting towards the championship and having a higher ranking spot. So that really wraps up our week preview for week 2. Really excited here. Follow on Instagram, the new SEC Media. Subscribe here on YouTube, the new SEC Podcast. We're also on Spotify if you want to listen in your car, at the gym, mowing your yard, whatever. You're getting annoyed if people in your house just put your AirPods in and just tune in and listen to us. And if there's anything you want to hear, previews, content, game picks, Anything that you disagree with or agree with, like, please let us know, like, comment. And we're excited to kind of keep this thing going here for the season. The party is not ending here in the SEC.
It's absolutely not. And we will be putting out the recaps of these games as we're excited to watch them. So be on the lookout for that next week. And thank you for listening. We'll catch you in the next one.
All right. Take it easy, y'all.